Deuteronomy 23. The eighth commandment, do not steal. And so remember with Deuteronomy that it isn't just a second telling of the law, it's going over the law, but it's expanding it. It's explaining the law. And so we're going through these commandments. And we looked at last time how if there was a slave and they had run away, you can't send them back. Right? There's no sending this person back. This was a foreign slave from another nation. They wanted to be in Israel. You're not making treaties with other countries. Other countries would consider it stealing, possibly. And then even that's what's in the law, we looked at Paul. You know, what did Paul do? Well, he sent Onesimus back to Philemon, and we looked at that story and why. And then if you look at verse 18, it says, you shall not bring the wages of a harlot or the price of a dog to the house of the Lord your God for any vowed offering, for both of these are an abomination to the Lord your God. And we talked about you can't just make money in an immoral way and say, well, I'm doing it for the Lord because I'm giving him a cut or I'm paying the Lord. I mean, it doesn't work like that. And so that you can't be accepted, you can't buy acceptance from God. And we talked about a lot of the reasons that people might do these things, but ultimately there is acceptance with God, but it's by faith, it's not through money. We're going to pick it up here in verse 19. Does somebody want to read 19 and 20 for us?
Amen. You shall not charge interest on loans to your brother, interest on money, interest on food, interest on anything that is lent for interest. You may charge a foreigner interest, but you may not charge your brother interest, that the Lord your God may bless you in all that you undertake in the land that you are entering to take possession of it.
Okay, thank you. So you can't charge interest to your brother. The ancient documents basically say interest rates were 20 to 50%. That's not a good deal. So 20 to 50%, hey, we're not doing that. You know, we don't have interest. And interestingly, the word for interest here, if you have King James, usury, it means to sting or to bite. Like literally the word comes from to bite or to sting. Isn't interest rate like a bite or a sting? Yeah, when they get that extra charge on there. And usury, which is the old English word, it really literally means to use. You know, it's almost like you become a tool for somebody. They're making money. Wow, I mean, I don't know, you think about the no interest, I mean, that's an economic stimulus package right there. 0% loans for everybody. Oh, that sounds pretty good. I think it sounds pretty good. But man, the idea with this is that you're not oppressing anybody. You know, why does someone need a loan? They're poor, they're in trouble, they have some kind of a need, and so they need a loan. And so you're not going to take advantage of this person. You're not going to stick it to them now that they're in this situation. And this poor person who's having trouble, they're not going to end up with out-of-control debt because that's what interest is going to do. Or you got this interest compounding, you can't pay off the debt, and it just goes through the roof, and now you're buried. Well, it isn't going to happen. You know, so that's nice. This is great that it's this way. I mean, the Bible, one of the things that's amazing, it isn't just don't lend with interest. You can't do that. I mean, you're supposed to lend even if you don't get it back. That's not just in the New Testament. If you look back in Deuteronomy 15, if you look at verses 7 to 11 here, it says, if there is any among you a poor man of your brethren within any of the gates in your land which the Lord your God has given you, you shall not harden your heart, nor shut your hand from your poor brother, but you shall open your hand wide to him and willingly lend him sufficient for his need, whatever he needs. Beware lest there be a wicked thought in your heart, saying, you know, it's the seventh year, the sabbatical year is coming up, and all the debts will be forgiven. The year of release is at hand, and your eye be evil, greedy against your poor brother, and you give him nothing, and he cry out to the Lord against you, and it becomes sin among you. You shall surely give to him, and your heart should not be grieved when you give to him, because for this thing the Lord your God will bless you in all your works, and in all to which you put your hand. For the poor will never cease from the land. Therefore I command you, saying, you shall open your hand wide to your brother, to your poor, your needy in your land. It's so interesting. It isn't such a concern. You're like, who wouldn't want their land and their business to be blessed? That sounds great. Well, just lend to this person. Well, I don't want to lend it to him, but don't be blessed. I mean, it's your choice. Like, the Lord can't handle this. So that's it. It's an issue of faith. If you look back at Exodus 25, in verses 25 to 27 here. Listen to what it says. That's not right. It's supposed to be Exodus 25. All right, it's definitely not Exodus 25. I don't know why I wrote that down. I check these, too. I really do. I don't like just come up here and like not check these references. Just imagine if I didn't check these references. What does it say?
I don't know.
Oh.
Good.
It does have a 25, yeah. Oh, that could be. If you lend money to any of my people who are poor among you, you shall not be like a moneylender to him. You shall not charge him interest. Tom, you're great. If you ever take, now this is the other part of this. If you ever take your neighbor's garment as a pledge, well, look, I lend him some money. How do I know I'm going to get it back? Well, I'm going to take something valuable of yours and hold it as collateral, right? I mean, that's kind of normal thinking. He says, but if you take your neighbor's garment as a pledge, you shall return it to him before the sun goes down. For this is his only covering. It means you can only hold it for half the day. I got it during the day. At night, you can have it again. You can't keep it. It's his only covering. It's his garment for his skin, what we sleep in. And he'll cry. If he cries to me, I'll hear him, and I'm gracious. You know, so it just, we see this generosity the Lord seems to expect from his people throughout the Scripture. We would also see that the nation, and we'll get to when we get to chapter 28, the nation is to be a lender, not a borrower. So it has kind of this national idea. And I just want to look at a couple things in the New Testament. Let's look at, so keep a finger here, and flip over to Luke chapter 6. Luke 6. I want to swing this mic out here. We need our audience mic. If I was really good at editing videos, I'd edit this out. You know what? I'm just going to use Tom's. That's why we don't do it. Well, does it have to be on too? Which one is that one? We'll see what happens. Anyone want to read Luke 6? Where were we? We are in looking at 34 and 35.
And if you lend to those from whom you hope to receive back, what credit is that to you? For even sinners lend to sinners to receive as much back. But love your enemies, do good, and lend, hoping for nothing in return. And your reward will be great, and you will be sons of the Most High, for he is kind to the unthankful and evil.
All right, so man, this whole idea of lending, here we're just talking about lending with no interest. I mean, this is just something we're supposed to be thinking about, the lending to people. And not even expecting that we're going to get it back. I mean, anyone can do that. It's just a different mindset, right? A person following the Lord is just supposed to have a different way of doing things, a different way of thinking. We follow God. We don't live like the world. Listen to Philippians 2. And don't anyone ask me for money after this, all right? I mean, you could try. Philippians 2, look at verse 4.
Look not every man on his own things, but every man also on the things of others.
I mean, that's the heart, right? We're to be concerned with other people, and that's this issue. It's not just my money, I can't lend it. It's, well, what's the deal with this person? What do they need? What is the interest for them? You know, if you look in that same chapter, Paul, he's saying, I trust, this is verse 19, in the Lord to send you Timothy. He's going to send Timothy. I have no one like-minded. Why? To be a blessing. Where's Paul? He's in jail. You know, you're all on your own when you're in jail. It isn't like they have, 3 square meals and cable TV in jail. And where he is, he needs somebody on the outside to help him. But he's willing. He wants to send this person away to benefit them. I mean, what a giving heart Paul has. We know in 1 Timothy where talks to the rich about being rich in good works, ready to give, willing to share. This is the same heart we find in the New Covenant. If you go back to Deuteronomy 23, so here he's saying, charge no interest to your brother for anything, and then to a foreigner, though, verse 20, you may charge interest, but to your brother you shall not charge interest, that the Lord your God may bless you in all to which you set your hand in the land which you are entering to possess. So the blessings of being in a covenant relationship with God. I mean, what a great thing. Like, people are going to say, I want to be in that nation. You know, it's a privilege to be part of it. And so whether it's a neighbor or a visitor, you can lend with interest if they're from another nation. You know, it's sort of a question. Someone was asking a question about, well, what if you pay them back and you give them a gift? You borrow this money, no interest, but then as a person, I want to give you a gift of some extra money when I give it back. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that would be, is that kosher, you know, to do that? I would think it's probably, if it's a judge or something, probably not. I mean, God's making a point to not do that, but it's just, it doesn't say. But I think the other piece of this is that it's not an economic theory, right? We have all these ideas about economics and how the economy should work and financial things like that. This isn't politics. This isn't about the market. This isn't about banking. This isn't about the Fed or the International Monetary Fund or any of these kind of high finance things. It's not about credit card industry. You know, what is this whole principle about? It's about how to be blessed by God. And it's just so amazing. I promise I'll bless you. That's God. Do this, and I'm going to be a blessing to you. That's it. It isn't about what's the right economic theory. If they're doing these right and good things to be a blessing to others, it's love in action, obeying God, helping others, doing it out of faith, trusting the Lord's going to hold up his end. That's a good thing. You know, this is a great way that they're living. You know, they didn't this isn't like their economic professors telling them this is what you should or shouldn't do. I want to look at a couple other verses about this. Proverbs 19. So we're going to flip over to Proverbs and look at verse 17. Someone would read that. Anybody got Proverbs 19:17?
He that hath pity upon the poor lends unto the Lord, and that which he has given will he pay him again.
That seems like a pretty good deal. So it's done unto the Lord. I mean, that's a great thing. Luke 14.
I don't know. In this translation here, it says that he, Jesus, God, will pay back what he has given.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
He's not going to shortchange you or say, "Oh, I was going to pay you back, but I'm all out." You know, that ain't going to happen.
It's like your reward is in heaven.
Amen. It's a different way of looking at it. Look at 12 through 14 here. Someone want to read that of Luke 14?
And then he also said to him who invited him, when you give a dinner or a supper, do not ask your friends, your brothers, your relatives, nor rich neighbors, lest they also invite you back and you be repaid. But when you give a feast, invite the poor, the maimed, the lame, the blind, and you will be blessed, because they cannot repay you. For you shall be repaid at the resurrection of the just.
Amen. Just like what this verse says that Jeff read, what Tom is saying, you know, that's the issue. We're saying, well, what if they don't pay me back? So what? You know, I mean, that it doesn't seem too concerned. So it's just a different heart about it, that the Lord knows what's going on. And so how can we do this? You know, how can this be? Well, money is not God. It's not our God. We don't worship money. You know, we worship the Lord. So then what does that make money? What is money? How do you, not a long dissertation, but like, what do you think, would you describe, what is money? It's a what?
Money is a necessary evil.
It's definitely necessary.
Tool.
A tool. The love of money is the root of all evil, so it definitely, it's a tool. I agree. Yeah, and it is a necessity. I mean, look, it's just the world we live in. You need money to live, and it's a tool. That's all it is. It's a tool. And so when you look at this and you kind of see the heart of the people and the heart of the Lord about this issue with money, and you see, man, you can't even lend with interest to your brother. Now imagine someone on the scene like a tax collector. And so understand in the New Testament, tax collectors are so hated, right? It's tax collectors and sinners, or tax collectors and prostitutes. That's the bottom of the barrel. That's the lowest of the low. They don't have a category below that of a horrible person. Well, why? What's a tax collector doing? Well, first, in what we find in the New Testament it's a Jewish person that's working for the Romans. So they join the enemy, to work for them, and they're going to collect taxes from their own people. And these people are becoming incredibly wealthy. Why? Because they can collect as much as they want. As long as you get the Romans as much as they want, anything above that you can just keep. And you've got a Roman soldier or soldiers at your disposal to collect the money. So no one can say no to you, or you have them killed. So this is what a tax collector is doing. You're not even supposed to charge interest, and here's this guy extorting money from his own people and benefiting it just in such a incredibly wealthy way. So you just get this picture of someone like Matthew, right? Jesus chooses Matthew. He's a tax collector, And then you think of Zacchaeus. Remember with Zacchaeus, nobody likes Zacchaeus. I mean, imagine you live in a town and everyone knows you and not one person likes you, and they're upset that Jesus is going to go to his house. That's sad. That's horrible. That's how much these people are hated. That's how they're behaving, so contrary to the Lord and to the heart of what it's supposed to be like. So it just helps us, I think, just get a little picture of that. We're going to go on back in chapter 23, but any comments or questions on charging interest or any of the other peripheral things we... Nice. No interest. That's biblical. Oh, my goodness. That's almost as good as what's the one where he says, does anyone know the definition of apathy? Who cares? Yeah. All right. We better move on. All right, let's look at the next couple of verses here, 21 to 23. Would someone like to read that for us? Deuteronomy 23, 21 to 23. Anybody?
When thou shalt vow a vow unto the Lord thy God, thou shalt not slack to pay it, for the Lord God will surely require it of thee, and it will be sin in thee. But if thou shalt forbear the vow, it shall be no sin in thee. That which is gone out of thy lips thou shalt keep and perform, even a free will offering, according to thou hast vowed unto the Lord thy God, which thou hast promised with thy mouth.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we're talking about making a vow or an oath or a promise. And notice what the important things to know about a vow or an oath is it's willing, right? You're voluntarily, no one's making you make this vow. You've decided on your own. But the point is, once you make this vow of your own free will, you are obligated. That's the short of this. And what are we talking about here? We're talking about theft, right? So this is stealing. If you say, Lord, this is what I'm going to do, and you don't do it, that's like theft. That's why we're in that. That's the section that we're in. That's what it's explaining to us. We happen to have quite a few examples, and we're going to look at a bunch. We got a couple really good ones, and we got some really bad ones to look at. And so this is going to be, we got a great chance to kind of illustrate this concept, New Testament and Old. Let's start with Genesis 28. I think this is the first vow in the Bible, and this is Jacob. And let's see how he says it here. This is verses 20 to 22.
Then Jacob made a vow, saying, if God will be with me, and will keep me in this way that I go, and will give me bread to eat and clothing to wear, so that I come again to my father's house in peace. Then the Lord shall be my God, and this stone which I have set up for a pillar shall be God's house. And of all that you give me, I will give you a full tenth to you.
So this is a vow he makes. Man, Lord, you're really going to be this? You're really going to do these things for me? I'm in. I'm going to follow you, and and he makes this vow. I'm going to give you a tenth. I'm going to give you this tithe. That's the idea. Look at Ecclesiastes. Ecclesiastes is right after Proverbs, chapter 5. Look what Solomon writes here, 4 to 7 here.
Mm-hmm. When you make a vow to God, do not delay to Do not protest to the temple messenger. My vow was a mistake. Why should God be angry at what you say and destroy the work of your hands? Much dreaming and many words are meaningless. Therefore, fear God.
That's pretty interesting. Man, should we write this on our mirror in the morning? Right? Don't let your mouth cause your flesh to sin. I mean, this is the kind of stuff we do. Can you imagine you're standing before God? Well, it was a big mistake. It was all a misunderstanding. It's like you got a lawyer and you're trying to figure out, how do I get myself out of this? You're the one that said it. No one made you. You know, it doesn't work like that. You don't say, well, I changed my mind. And so that's what people are looking to do. David would write about keeping your vows. And so we got a couple examples of some foolish vows. One, this is 1 Samuel. So we're going to flip over to 1 Samuel 14. This is King Saul. I know you're shocked to hear that King Saul made a foolish vow. He had a few problems. There was a battle against the Philistines. And remember Jonathan, his son. There's Jonathan and his armor bearer, right? And Jonathan's a faithful guy. Jonathan loves David. Jonathan's right on track. King Saul's off track. You know, he's just not with it. He doesn't really follow the Lord. So he's got some problems. And in this chapter, he makes some rash vow. They're in this battle. And so he says, this is verse 24, the men of Israel were distressed that day, for Saul had placed the people under oath, saying, cursed is the man who eats any food until evening, before I have taken vengeance on my enemies. So none of the people tasted food. Well, the problem was they were winning. And I don't think in an army battle with swords and sticks and all this stuff, I think it takes a lot of energy. And so now the enemy's on the run and they got to chase him and no one gets to eat today. This is ridiculous. You know, they're about to have this great rout, but they're hampered because they don't have enough energy. They need some food. And so Saul made this vow. You know, he wanted to sound so good. But the problem was, look at verse 27, but Jonathan had not heard his father charge the people with the oath. Well, he wasn't there when all this happened. He was out starting the fight and got the Philistines on the run, and everyone joined in. And Saul had said this after Jonathan had taken off. Therefore, he stretched out the end of the rod that was in his hand and dipped it in a honeycomb and put his hand to his mouth, and his countenance brightened. Hey, he's hungry. You need a little energy. Got a whole spoonful of honey. And one of the people said, your father strictly charged the people with an oath, saying, cursed is the man who eats food this day. And the people were faint. But Jonathan said, my father has troubled the land. Look now how my countenance is brightened because I tasted a little bit of this honey. You know, man, everyone should have some of this. That's his idea. How much better if the people had eaten freely today of the spoil of their enemies, which they found, for now would there not have been much great slaughter among the Philistines? We would have had this tremendous victory. They go down to verse 37. So the problem is the people had fallen into sin. They're starving to death, and so they just jump on these animals and they're eating them, and they're not draining the blood out, and there's all these problems. And so they want to go, they're trying to seek the Lord about going further into battle, and he's not hearing from the Lord. And so he knows there's something wrong. Of course, he thinks it's everyone else. It's him. But so Saul asked counsel of God, shall I go down after the Philistines? Verse 37. Will you deliver them into the hand of Israel? But he did not answer him that day. And Saul said, come over here, you chiefs of the people, and know and see what the sin was today. We need to figure out what's gone wrong. For as the Lord lives, who saves Israel? Though it be in Jonathan my son, he shall surely die. If there's some sin in the camp, and that's why we can't go in to have this victory, even if it's my own kid, we'll kill him. But not a man among the people answered him. No one's saying a word. Oh, man, I don't want to say anything. I'm not getting in the middle of this. And so he says to all Israel, you be on one side, and my son Jonathan and I will be on the other side. They're going to kind of draw lots. Well, let's figure out who this is. Is it me and my son? Is it my family, or is it you people? So Saul and Jonathan were taken. It's Saul and Jonathan, but the people escaped. And Saul said, cast lots between my son and Jonathan and me. So Jonathan was taken. Then Saul said to Jonathan, tell me what you have done. And Jonathan told him, and he said, I only tasted a little honey with the end of the rod that was in my hand, so now I must die. And so Saul, being the genius that he is, God do so and more also, for you shall surely die, Jonathan. This is worthy of death? I mean, what is wrong with this guy? And amazingly, it's the king, and the king can do whatever he wants for the most part. I mean, what is anyone going to say or do? But the people said to Saul, "Shall Jonathan die, who has accomplished this great deliverance in Israel? Certainly not. As the Lord lives, not one hair of his head shall fall to the ground, for he has worked with God this day." So the people rescued Jonathan, he did not die. So amazingly, they stand up to the king, and they're right, of course, and Jonathan lives. So it's just crazy. But all this because Saul had to make this vow. He had to say this rash thing. There's another bad vow. It's Judges chapter 11. I know everyone remembers Jephthah. So there's several judges. Early on in the Judges, there's this judge named Jephthah. The deal with Jephthah was that I think he was he was an illegitimate child. I forget. Maybe it was his father, wasn't married, has him, or it was his mother. And then they get married, and then there's a family, and the rest of the family says, you're just like the black sheep. You're not really part of this family. We don't want you, and so you have to leave. And he takes off, and he becomes kind of a warrior type person, a fighter. He has a crowd of a bunch of, I forget the word it uses, but we'll just say hooligans or some kind of ill-mannered, not well-behaved group of people that he traveled around with, a gang. And so when they get in trouble, when the area where Jephthah's family's from gets into these people want to attack, they say, we need a guy like Jephthah. We need a fighter. We need somebody that can handle things. But meanwhile, this guy does seem to trust the Lord. And so he takes over, he wins the battle for them. But look at the story here in this chapter, starting at verse 30. Look at 30 to 33. Someone want to read that for us?
Which chapter was it?
Judges 11, 30 to 33.
And Jephthah vowed a vow unto the Lord and said, If thou shalt without fail deliver the children of Ammon into my hands, then it shall be that whatsoever come forth of the doors of my house to meet me, when I return in peace from the children of Ammon, shall surely be the Lord's, and I will offer it up for a burnt offering. So Jephthah passed over unto the children of Ammon to fight against them, and the Lord delivered them into his hands. And he smote them for a roar, even till thou come to Minnith, even 20 cities, unto the plains of the vineyards, with a very great slaughter. Thus children of Ammon were subdued before the children of Israel.
Man, so this is great. He makes this vow, and Lord, if you'll do this, and I'll give you whatever comes out. But this is this rash vow, right? Whatever comes out of the door of my house first. And so what happens? He goes home. Jephthah came to his house at Mizpah. There was his daughter coming out to meet him with timbrels and dancing. She was his only child. Besides her, he had neither son nor daughter. And it came to pass when he saw her that he tore his clothes and said, Alas, my daughter, you have brought me very low. You are among those who trouble me, for I have given my word to the Lord, and I cannot go back on it. Amazingly, this girl says, hey, whatever you say, if you said it made a vow to the Lord, then it has to be. And then it seems she spends a little bit of time kind of in mourning or away, and ultimately it doesn't tell us exactly what happened. Some people think he killed her. It doesn't seem right. Yes, he has to keep his vow, but you can't murder your own child. So most people believe that she was kind of put away almost like a nun, like a vow of chastity, and she lived somewhere else, and he didn't have any children or grandchildren as a result. So anyway, it was a rash vow. I mean, that's the point. He should have been a little more specific. Couple other vows. Look at Proverbs chapter 20. Look what it says about vows here. Verse 25. Uh-huh.
It is a trap to dedicate something rashly and only later to consider one's vows.
Yeah, it's a trap. Just don't say it. Don't make a rash vow. You're saying it. It means something. Look at Mark. Look at a couple places in the New Testament. Mark chapter 6. Remember what happened to John the Baptist. This is verse 21. An opportune day came when Herod, on his birthday, gave a feast for his nobles, high officers, and chief men of Galilee. And when Herodias' daughter herself came in and danced, that pleased Herod and those who sat, the king said to the girl, "Ask me whatever you want, and I will give it to you." And of course, this is before a crowd. He's a king, so he's bragging. He's doing this bold thing. Anything you want. He swore to her, "Whatever you ask me, I will give you up to half my kingdom." And she's a young girl. He's got to be thinking she wants a pony, maybe a ring. I don't know. What could she really ask for? But the problem is the mother. And the mother hates John the Baptist because he's already spoken about that this marriage between Herodias and Herod is all wrong. He stole her from his own brother. It's just not a good marriage. It's immoral what's happening. And so she's been looking for a chance to get him killed. And so instead of this mom, can you imagine here, what a gift to the child. Anything you want, honey. And the mom comes over and she steals this gift from her own daughter so that she can get what she wants, which is murdering someone. What a woman, right? So he went out and said to her mother, "What shall I ask?" And she said, "The head of John the Baptist." And so that's it. She comes in, "That's what I want." And the king is grieved because he knows this is going to cost him. It's not right. But he hasn't enough guts to go back on his own word. And so he keeps this rash, ridiculous vow. And they deliver John the Baptist's head on a platter. I mean, it's a sad story. Remember when Paul was in prison, and remember when his nephew came and said, "Hey, these men want to kill you. They're going to move Paul from one place to another for his trial." And he goes to the centurion and he tells him, "They're going to ambush you. There's 40 men that have made a vow. We're not going to eat until we kill Paul." But they're sorry about that, right? Because they didn't get to kill him, right? "Oh, I'm starving to death. Where is he?" Yeah, he got away. Ha ha, right? So that didn't work out for them. Look at what's the last one on this? Matthew 23. Matthew 23. Starting in verse 16 here. So Jesus is ripping into, one of the times when he rips into the Pharisees, the leaders, and he says, "Woe to you, blind guides." And notice what they're doing, who say, "Whoever swears by the temple, it is nothing. But whoever swears by the gold of the temple, he's obliged to perform it." So what they've done is made an art out of vows. Well, if you say the vow like this, you have to keep it. But if you say it like this, everyone thinks you mean it, but you don't actually have to keep it. And it's like an art form, right? And so this is what's happening. He said, this is ridiculous. You're going to make a vow by the temple and declare, well, you don't have to keep that one. But if you swear by the gold of the temple, well, you have to keep it. So, of course, everyone's, well, I swear by the temple. It sounds so great. But they know that they're not going to keep that vow. Fools and blind, for which is greater, the gold or the temple that sanctifies the gold? And whoever swears by the altar, it is nothing. That's what they're saying. I swear by the altar of the temple. But whoever swears by the gift that is on it, he's obliged to perform it. That's their game. Fools and blind, which is greater, the gift or the altar that sanctifies the gift? They got it wrong. I mean, they picked the wrong two things. Even the whole thing's wrong, but at least you could have got the right thing to swear on. Therefore, he says, he who swears by the altar swears by it and by all things on it. He who swears by the temple swears by it and by him who dwells in it. And he who swears by heaven swears by the throne of God and by him who sits on it. All these vows you made thinking they didn't mean anything, guess what? They all count. That would be bad news. Sure didn't like hearing that one. Yeah, who wants to write that check out now? Oh, my goodness, I don't even remember what I vowed, they're probably thinking. All right, so these are our negative versions, right? There's a lot of negative vows. But there are some positive vows. You got the number 6 is the Nazarite vow. I don't know if anyone remembers the Nazarite vow. So you're freely able to declare yourself, I want to take this Nazarite vow. No one's making you do it. You pick a period of time. It isn't without end. You have to cut your hair, shave your head, nothing fermented to drink, and you can't be around a dead body. or a dead animal. So there are these rules for the time that you're taking this vow, and you're setting yourself as holy to the Lord. I really want to set myself apart to the Lord. I'm going to take this period of time. I'm going to do this. I want to get serious, really want to get close to the Lord, to hear from the Lord. And so they take this Nazarite vow. Samson is supposed to be a Nazarite, right? He violated all of these things. Had his with his hair, and being with a dead animal, and drinking parties. If you remember Paul in Acts 18, Paul is traveling to Jerusalem, and he's going to have shaved his head. He's made some sort of vow. It might have been a Nazarite vow. And he's going to pay for those men. Remember when he gets to Jerusalem, and they're kind of concerned about Paul, that, what are you teaching people? There's sort of some question. It'd be really great if you just went with these men to the temple and paid for their sacrifices. They've all made a vow. And so, there was this time where he said, yeah, sure, I'm happy. It totally backfired and blew up in his face. But there were these times where people were making vows. Zacchaeus, right? So when Zacchaeus, we talked about before, when Zacchaeus does meet the Lord, what's he say? Do you remember what he declares? Yeah. I ought to pay this back multiple times, everyone I've wronged, and more. It's stand right there before the Lord. Salvation has come to this man's house. Why? Not because he made a vow, not because he paid anyone back. He got saved, and this is just what he felt like doing. Lord, I'm going to do this for you. You've done everything for me. So wow, that was a good thing what Zacchaeus was doing. 1 Samuel chapter 1. We'll look at one more. 1 Samuel 1, and this is Hannah. It's such a great chapter, and this is the story of Samuel before he's going to be born and grow up in the temple. But if you remember the story, Hannah, it's Elkanah's wife. So there's this man, Elkanah, and he's got two wives. And anytime you've seen two wives in the Bible, it's always bad, right? And so the one wife torments the other wife. And Hannah's this great, faithful lady, but she can't have kids. She's barren. The other lady's popping out kids all over the place. And so it's wrecking her. It's killing her. And so they go to the temple every year. And so she goes to the temple. And she rose, it says, this is verse 9. So Hannah rose after they had finished eating and drinking in Shiloh, and now Eli the priest was sitting on the seat by the doorpost of the tabernacle of the Lord. That does seem to be questionable because there's no chairs in the tabernacle. I don't think the priest work's ever supposed to be done, so the guy's sitting around doesn't seem right. And she was in bitterness of soul and prayed to the Lord and wept in anguish. You see her heart. And she made a vow and said, O Lord of hosts, if you will indeed look on the affliction of your maidservant, and remember me, and not forget your maidservant, but will give your maidservant a male child, and I will give him to the Lord all the days of his life. No razor shall come upon his head. And it happened, as she continued praying before the Lord, that Eli watched her mouth. So she's just praying to herself, but her mouth is moving. And Hannah spoke in her heart, only her lips moved, but her voice was not heard. Therefore Eli thought she was drunk. I mean, does everyone come to the temple drunk? I mean, what is going on at the temple? Do you just assume people there are loaded? I mean, it's not good. So Eli said to her, how long will you be drunk? Put your wine away from you. But Hannah answered and said, this is great that she would even speak and not just run away and cry. I mean, you would think she's already so upset. And the man in her life, her husband, has not really been a great help. And here she's interacting with the high priest. He's not really being very helpful. No, my Lord, I'm a woman of sorrowful spirit. I have drunk neither wine nor intoxicating drink, but have poured out my soul before the Lord. Do not consider your maidservant a wicked woman, for out of the abundance of my complaint and grief I have spoken until now. And Eli answered, go in peace, and the Lord and the God of Israel grant your petition which you have asked him. And she said, let your maidservant find favor in your sight. So she went away and ate, and her face was no longer sad. I just think it's such a great, her prayer and her vow is so great. And she goes away no longer sad. She's not pregnant. And the baby's not even conceived yet. But she's poured it out to the Lord. She totally trusts the Lord. And she knows he's involved. And so it completely changes her. What a blessing that, we can pour our hearts out to God. All right, so go back to Deuteronomy. And so he's saying here, that was verse 21. We'll go a little quicker. If you abstain, verse 22, from vowing, it shall not be a sin to you. All right, well, we see these examples of vowing. Taking a vow is fine. Don't be rash. Be careful what you vow. But if you don't want to vow, it's okay. It's not a problem. You're not required to make vows. He says, and that which is gone from your lips, verse 23, you shall keep and perform, for you voluntarily vow to the Lord your God what you have promised with your mouth. It's your words, right? And so this is about integrity, and this is about truth. This is about your words matter, and they mean something. And so does your relationship to the Lord. You cannot make a vow to the Lord and act like it doesn't matter. I mean, you're in a relationship with him. So we have to be careful how we're talking to the Lord. Don't take the Lord's name in vain. Are you going to make this vow in the name of the Lord and then not keep it? That's like violating 2 commandments now. I mean, it's a mess. But the Lord is going to keep his end of the deal, you know. I think it's kind of like, you picture yourself, you have to go to the store, and it's like Christmas time, right? And like the shopping center, it's so many cars, you're never going to get a parking space. And you're like, oh, Lord, if you would help me find a parking space, I will. Oh, never mind, I found one, you know. I mean, it just doesn't work like that, you know. But that's kind of how they're acting, right? Oh, I got it, Lord. I didn't mean that whole vow thing. It's not right. And this is what Jesus would say, you know, in Matthew 5. Matthew 5, look at verse 33. He says, you have heard that it was said to those of old, you shall not swear falsely, but you shall perform your oaths to the Lord. Right? That's what we're reading about. But I say to you, do not swear at all, neither by heaven, for it is God's throne, nor by the earth, for it is the footstool, nor by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great King. Nor shall you swear by your head, because you cannot make one hair white or black, but let your yes be yes and no, no, for whatever is more than these is from the evil one. I don't think he's saying you can't make a vow. He's saying don't swear, you know. Lord, I swear, you know, this, that, and other, that I'm going to do this. Just say what you're going to do. And don't make some big, like the Pharisees are doing. I'm going to swear on the gold of the temple. Just forget it with that stuff. You know, it's just for show, you know. You like that? Good. Okay. We're going to move on, I think, to the last couple verses. What about comments or questions about vows?
Now, does that also deal with a vow between person to person, or is that just talking about between you and God?
Right. I mean, I think the question is when you bring the Lord into it. I mean, I think you would assume you have to keep a vow to another human if you make it, but this is currently specifically talking about to God, or when you're bringing God's name into it. So he's either involved or it is between you and him. If it was just to another person, I mean, you have don't lie, I mean, and steal. And so, I mean, I think maybe they would fall under that. I don't know if there's other specific commandments that get to it, but I would assume you would be obligated to, because it's not going to tell you. It's don't bear false witness. You know, you can't just make stuff up with people. But yeah, that's a good point. We'll have to see if there's another commandment that connects to all that. All right, so last couple of verses, we'll polish off 23 here. So he says, when you come into your neighbor's vineyard, you may eat your fill of grapes at your pleasure, but you shall not put any in your container. When you come into your neighbor's standing grain, you may pluck the heads with your hand, but you shall not use a sickle on your neighbor's standing grain. So again, remember we're talking about do not steal. Okay, so here, you know, what are you allowed to do at your neighbor's farm? It's kind of the idea. And there's this idea of sharing and providing. You know, the owner of the land is going to be generous, but there's limits. So this is interesting. There's limits on both parties, on the person who owns the land and the people that are here. So the owner's not supposed to put up, keep out, warning, guard dog, guarded by Smith & Wesson, whatever. You know, it's not supposed to be that kind of stuff up on the sign, on the property. And so it's protection for people. People, maybe they work there, especially if it's harvest time. You're going to bring in all kinds of extra workers. That's normal. You know, well, what if they are hungry? Okay, well, you know, they're allowed to eat. What if someone's just traveling through? I mean, there's no 7-Eleven, right? Well, you're just traveling through. You're on a journey, and all your provisions are gone. And look, you're in this field. It's okay to have a little bit to eat. You need some grapes or something. Go ahead. There's no fast food. There's no supermarket. There's no 24/7 anything. And so this is not that crazy. Yeah, but how much can you take? You know, and how much can you take when you're traveling? I mean, look, they don't have cooler bags. I mean, you got a donkey and a pack, right? And stuff goes bad. You know, you can only carry so much provisions. And so, you know, this is a nice thing to be able to do. But don't bring a container. You know, don't be like, well, I got this bag. It's empty right now. I'm going to fill it up. No, don't do that. That's wrong. So we're recognizing that the landowner has property rights, and then but the people are allowed. And so it's protecting both groups. What's reasonable? You know, there is a limit. We're not going to abuse either group. Both groups have limitations here. Why? Well, it all belongs to who? It's all God's. It's all His anyway. You know, so He gets to have this say. So we're not going to encourage people to hoard. I mean, we're going to welcome people and be generous, but they're not to steal and take more than really they need. And really, I mean, it's love God and love your neighbor as yourself. I mean, what would you want to do if it was your land? What would you want to have done if you were hungry? You know, that's pretty reasonable to think of it that way. So when you come into your neighbor's standing grain, you may pluck the heads with your hand, but you shall not use a sickle on your neighbor's standing grain. Okay, so if you want to, you know, there's this grain, like a wheat head, is almost like eating a peanut, you know, or there's this head of the wheat, and you can pull it off, and you can eat it, and it's like something small, like a little snack. It's like grabbing an apple. So, you know, there's these provisions about in the law. When you finally have the harvest, what do you do with the corners of the fields? You remember? You leave them. You leave them for the poor. You know, how big of a corner? I don't know. You know, but you don't take it all. You leave some, and when we get to in the next chapter, I think it's in the next chapter, is going to talk about when you harvest your grapes, when you shake out a tree that has fruit, and there's still some up there. You don't go back and get every last one. You just leave some because you know there's going to be people that come through that need some. That's normal. That's good. That's what we're supposed to do. So I want you to see this. This comes up. What's important about this verse, another thing that's important, is Matthew 12. And this scenario comes up exactly in this gospel story with Jesus and the disciples. So this is Matthew 12. Look at verse 1. It says, at that time Jesus went through the grain fields on the Sabbath. So it's not just that it's the grain fields. We know what the rules are. But it's also on the Sabbath. And man, there's a lot of rules about what you can do and can't do on the Sabbath. And his disciples were hungry and began to pluck heads of grain to eat. That's normal, right? That's what the law says you're allowed to do. What's the problem? The problem is it's a Sabbath. And so the Pharisees, the law doesn't say you can't do this, but the Pharisees have interpreted the law in a way this is absolutely wrong. And the Pharisees saw it, and they said to him, look, your disciples are doing what is not lawful to do on the Sabbath. Luke tells the same story, and it says that they rubbed it in their hands. And so this is how the Pharisees define working on the Sabbath. If you were to pluck one head of grain, that's reaping. If you rub it like they did, that's threshing. And then if you blow the chaffy stuff off, that's winnowing. And then if you eat it, that's storing. It's like you broke 4 rules. Like, are you kidding, right? That's what these guys are like. You know, that's what they're like. It says in the rabbinic writings that if you accidentally, they won't walk on the grass. Okay, this is so great. This is so typical. Are you allowed to walk on the grass on the Sabbath? Of course you're allowed to walk on the Sabbath on the grass. But what if there's just some random free piece of grain out there and you accidentally step on it and then you turn and then because you wear a robe it kind of winnows it and then an animal eats it and it gets stored. You'd be breaking the law, so we don't walk on grass. I mean, that's misery. Right? That's turning the law into this horrible thing. So that's what they're like. So Jesus takes this opportunity to let them have it, whatever, to try to straighten them out. And he said to them, have you not read, which is so funny, right? Because they've memorized the Bible. So that's a pretty big poke right there. Haven't you read this? Haven't we read it? We know it by heart. What David did when he was hungry, he and those who were with him, how he entered the house of God and ate the showbread, which was not lawful for him to eat, nor for those who were with him, but only for the priests. So the law said that it's for the priests, but it doesn't technically say you couldn't give it away to someone else. And that's what the priest did. In this case, these men were hungry, and he felt that was right to do. Same thing with this situation. Have you not read in the law that on the Sabbath the priests in the temple profane the Sabbath and are blameless? Well, what do you mean? Well, on the Sabbath, there's like twice as much work to do as a regular day if you're a priest with the sacrifices and all the things going on. No one's got a problem with that. So here are these other examples. Here are these other situations. They don't even understand what the Sabbath is for. They want to say Sabbath is for rest. Hey, does the Bible say the Sabbath is for rest? Absolutely. But they've set their terms, and they're wrong. They're wrong. Look what he says to them. Yet I say to you that in this place there is one greater than the temple. And if you had known what this means, I desire mercy and not sacrifice, you would not have condemned the guiltless. That is a heavy charge, to condemn someone who's guiltless. That's something they would have been recoiled to hear, that they had done that. For the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath. That really would have got them too. And what does Jesus say the Sabbath is for? The Pharisees say man is for the Sabbath. We serve the Sabbath. They've become slaves to this idea of the Sabbath. We can't even eat something if we're hungry because if we pick this head of grain. But what does the Lord say? Sabbath was made for man. You've got it all wrong. So, man, it's so great that the Lord takes this chance and this opportunity and explain it to them. How about any comments or questions on that?
The one thing that came to my mind was 2 Thessalonians chapter 3, where it says, he who doesn't work doesn't eat. You just imagine somebody just wandering around his neighbor's field all day.
You think this picking grain for free is easy? It's hard work. Well, I think there's definitely they definitely have a heart for this being concerned for abuse. And I think it's they didn't give spot out every little detail here, but I think they have elders and leaders that are bring down the hammer on the people that need the hammer brought down on, I would assume. But it's a good point. I like hearing more of how your brain works. That's scary. Yeah, thanks. Any other comments or questions?
Of course, there was a big difference between then and now, homelessness
Mhm.
wise. I think I look at it that way, where
Interesting. Is it the same characteristic? Yeah.
because to me it's like being an ex-drug addict. I know my kind,
Mhm.
or so I know what he's gonna do if I give him a dollar bill.
Mm.
I'd rather give you a hamburger than
Yeah.
a dollar bill.
Right.
Type of
What's your real need?
yeah.
To try to meet a need, versus a want.
Right.
That's a good point. And it's hard. You want to help people, but you got different categories. You get addiction, and there's just people that are criminals, and you have people that are have mental issues, and we have these other things to sort out. But our hearts to help them, hopefully. Well, if you want to read ahead, the next part is going to be about divorce. That's going to be great. So we're going to get into marriage and divorce, and feel welcome to bring your questions, and it should be interesting. So we'll look at the first part of chapter 24 next time. How about someone closing us in prayer?
So Lord Jesus Christ, we just want to thank you once again for blessing us for the time of worship unto you. I want to thank you for the word that you gave Pastor Jason to feed us, Lord Jesus Christ, to strengthen us, to educate us, to mature us, my Lord God, to just live it out, my Lord God. So I just thank you for that. Continue blessing him in the wisdom and the knowledge. Protect his family, protect his home, Lord God. Protect the body that you've given to him to nurture. That's awesome, Lord God, to be able to listen, Lord Jesus Christ, to sit in and listen, Lord God. Look forward to that every Wednesday. And I just want to pray for each and every one of us here.
Yes.
And our personal relationship with you, Lord God, that you strengthen it, Lord God, that you meet our needs, my Lord God, and understand whether we understand it or not, my Lord God. We know that you're in control. So just protect us and guide us, Lord God, as we read your word, my Lord God. May we not just read it, and may we not leave the way we came in.
Yes.
May we be transformed by the renewal of your mind, by the renewal of your word, my Lord Jesus Christ, that we just got brought forth, Lord God, that we go out there, Lord Jesus Christ, and live out your word. So I just thank you for that, my Lord God, and may our worship, Lord God, on our day-to-day be a sweet-smelling aroma to you, my Lord God. May it be sincere, Lord Jesus Christ, and just bring glory to your name. I just thank you for that, Lord God. Protect us and guide us, Lord Jesus Christ. May we continue to be the salt and the light to this world, Lord God. May our what comes out of our mouth, Lord God, may it be something that we understand and to know that the consistency through what comes out of our mouth, through our actions, Lord Jesus Christ, that it be consistent with the word.
Yes.
May they understand and know and that there's something different about each and every one of us, Lord God, as Christians, my Lord God, that we're living it out, Lord God. We don't just talk the talk, but we walk the walk as well. So, Holy Spirit, just give us the strength to continue to move forward. We just thank you. We love you. And how do we love you? By being obedient to your word. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.